All right, so get ready because today we are taking a deep dive into the one and only Will Ferrell
Oh, yeah.
and his impact on Saturday Night Live. We'll be talking all about iconic sketches,
Mhm.
unforgettable characters,
Mhm.
and really how his time on SNL shaped American comedy.
Absolutely.
You know, you're in for laughs, you're in for insights, and maybe even a few surprises along the way. Like,
Yeah.
did you know that Will Ferrell's SNL audition
Oh, wow.
involved him impersonating a cat,
Really?
playing with a toy?
I did not know that.
And where else would we even begin with Will Ferrell?
It's pretty amazing. That says so much about his comedic DNA.
Totally.
It's not just about being funny. It's about just committing to the bit no matter how ridiculous it is.
Uh-huh.
And that fearless, absurd energy, that's what made him such a force on SNL.
Totally. Okay, so before we get to the cowbell and the cheerleading and all that,
Yeah.
let's back up a little bit because what's fascinating to me is that Ferrell didn't come from a traditional stand-up background.
Right.
Tell us about his path to comedy because it wasn't exactly a straight shot to Studio 8H.
You're right. It's not the usual path. Will Ferrell actually studied sports journalism in college.
Wow.
I mean, can you imagine him like prepping for a career in sports reporting?
Right.
But even then, he was drawn to humor,
Yeah.
finding that funny side of any situation he could.
Ah,
And that eventually led him to the Groundlings,
okay.
the legendary improv troupe. That's where he really honed his comedic timing and his knack for character work.
So the Groundlings was like his comedy boot camp,
Yeah,
getting ready for the fast-paced, anything-goes world of SNL.
exactly. And you can really see how that training paid off when he joined the SNL cast in 1995.
Uh-huh.
He jumped right in and created a string of iconic characters and sketches that we're still quoting today.
All right.
I mean, the guy describes his 7 seasons on SNL as the hardest but most fun job he's ever had.
Wow.
That tells you something right there.
He does. He clearly loved the challenge, right? The pressure cooker of having to be funny week after week.
Yeah.
But let's get to the good stuff, the sketches.
Oh, okay.
We've got to talk about Spartan cheerleaders.
Oh, yeah.
More cowbell
Classic.
and his George W. Bush impersonation.
Yes.
Let's start with those cheerleaders.
Okay.
What was it about that sketch that made it such a classic?
Well, the premise itself is genius. You've got Will Ferrell and Sherry O'Terry as these overly enthusiastic, slightly clueless high school cheerleaders who are desperately trying to make the squad.
Right.
But here's the key. They commit to those characters so hard.
Yeah.
It's what makes the whole thing hilarious.
Right. The more ridiculous the premise, the more dedicated he is to making it work.
Uh-huh.
He throws himself into those awkward cartwheels and overly peppy cheers.
Yep.
He's not afraid to look ridiculous at all.
Totally.
And that fearlessness is what makes it so funny.
Absolutely. He understands that true comedy often lies in embracing the absurd, the over-the-top.
Uh-huh.
And he does it with such infectious joy that you can't help but laugh along.
Speaking of infectious joy,
Okay.
there's no way we can skip more cowbell.
Right.
That sketch is a pop culture phenomenon.
Yeah.
What do you think it is about it that continues to hold such a grip on our collective comedic consciousness?
Well, for starters, the premise is just bonkers. You've got a fictionalized recording session
Right.
for Blue Oyster Cult's Don't Fear the Reaper with Christopher Walken
Yeah.
playing this eccentric producer obsessed with the cowbell. I mean, come on.
It's so good.
It's great.
And then you drop Will Ferrell into that mix
Exactly.
as Gene Frankel,
Oh, my God.
the overzealous cowbell player. His energy is off the charts.
It's pure, unadulterated Ferrell.
Yeah.
He takes a simple a cowbell
Right.
and turns it into a comedic weapon of mass destruction.
But it's not just yelling, I gotta have more cowbell, right?
no!
It's how he delivers it.
It's everything. It's the desperation in his voice.
Yeah.
The single-mindedness he makes you believe that Gene Frankel needs that cowbell.
He does.
And that commitment,
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
what makes it so quotable and hilarious.
Okay, let's shift gears to his George W. Bush impersonation. It was such a big part of his SNL legacy.
Yeah,
And it came at a time when the political climate was pretty charged.
for sure.
How did he manage to satirize a sitting president while still keeping it funny, maybe even a bit endearing?
It's a testament to his ability to find humor without being mean-spirited.
Mhm.
He wasn't trying to tear Bush down.
Yeah.
Instead, he focused on specific mannerisms and speech patterns,
Right.
amplifying them just enough for comedic effect.
So instead of mockery, it was more like playful ribbing.
Exactly. And that's why it resonated with so many people, even those who might not have agreed with Bush's politics.
Yeah.
It felt like good-natured fun, poking fun at power, but not in a cruel way.
It feels like that approach, that mix of intelligence, absurdity, and heart is what defines his entire career.
Yeah.
From SNL to his movies, he makes us laugh,
Yeah.
but also makes us think, okay, before we dive into his life beyond SNL, there's one more thing we have to talk about.
You mean?
I know you're on the edge of your seat, but you'll have to wait just a little longer. We'll be back in part 2 to explore Ferrell's thoughts on SNL's 50th anniversary and delve deeper into the legacy of his comedic style. See you there.
See this.
Okay, all right.
Awesome.
Cool.
Work it.
Sounds good. All right, welcome back. So glad we're finally getting to talk about Ferrell's thoughts on SNL's 50th anniversary.
I know, right?
Huge milestone
Yeah.
for the show. And, hearing his perspective is really fascinating.
Yeah, it's especially interesting to hear from someone who played such a huge role
Right.
in SNL's history.
Right.
So what were some of his key takeaways on this momentous occasion?
Well, I think first and foremost, he's just blown away by the show's longevity.
Right.
I mean, 50 years in the comedy world is like an eternity.
It's crazy.
To stay relevant for that long in a world that's constantly changing, it's just incredible.
He gives a lot of credit to Lorne Michaels, right?
Oh, absolutely,
I
man.
mean, the guy is basically synonymous with SNL at this point.
Yeah, Ferrell praises Michaels for having this just incredible vision.
Creating a show that could capture the zeitgeist week after week,
Yeah.
year after year. And he also talks about Michael's talent for spotting and nurturing comedic talent.
Yeah.
I mean, so many comedy legends
Oh, yeah.
got their start on that show.
It's like a comedy breeding ground.
Totally. But even with all that talent and experience, putting together a 50th anniversary special must have been daunting.
Oh, totally. And Ferrell jokes about, being glad he wasn't the one tasked with cramming 50 years of comedy into a single show.
I can only imagine.
Right, but you can tell he has so much respect for the institution of SNL, even though he's moved on to other things.
Yeah.
It's interesting that even with all his movie success,
Right.
he still seems to see his time on SNL as really formative.
Yeah.
He talks about the lessons he learned, the work ethic it instilled in him,
Uh-huh.
and of course the friendships that he made.
Yeah, and what's inspiring is that it shows how SNL isn't just a stepping stone to something else.
Right.
It's an experience that really shapes you comedically and personally.
Yeah.
It's where you hone your voice, forge your style, and make those connections that last a lifetime.
It makes you wonder, though, does he ever miss that SNL chaos?
Yeah.
Even with all the Hollywood success.
Right. It's hard to imagine him not craving that live energy, the
Yeah.
instant feedback from the audience.
Totally.
Maybe that's why he keeps popping up on the show even years later. Like
Yeah.
He just can't quite stay away.
Okay, speaking of moving on, let's talk about Ferrell's life beyond SNL.
Mm.
I mean, Anchorman, Elf, Talladega Nights.
Oh my God.
The guy has starred in some of the most quotable comedies
Yes.
of the last 2 decades. He's a comedic heavyweight.
And what's so cool is that you can see the DNA of his SNL work in his films.
Totally.
It's that same commitment to absurdity, but with bigger budgets and even more outlandish scenarios.
He took that fearless energy from Studio 8H and brought it to the big screen.
Exactly.
So as we wrap up this part of our deep dive,
Okay.
let's go back to that initial question. How did Ferrell's comedic journey shape SNL, and how did SNL shape him?
It really is a two-way street, isn't it?
Yeah.
SNL gave him a platform, a space to experiment and hone his craft.
Uh-huh.
But he brought something unique to the show, too, that willingness to go big, to be silly,
Right.
to make himself the butt of the joke. It was infectious.
He wasn't afraid to push the boundaries of what was considered funny.
Yeah.
And that energy really rubbed off on everyone. His sketches weren't just funny. They were joyful.
Right.
They reminded everyone, including the audience at home,
Mm-hmm.
that sometimes the best comedy is about letting go and embracing the ridiculous.
And that's something that shines through in all his work. It's
Yeah.
not just about punchlines and gags.
Right.
It's about reminding us to not take ourselves too seriously.
Now, as we head into the final part of our deep dives,
Okay.
I want to leave you with a question to ponder. What is it about Ferrell's humor that makes it so enduring, so beloved?
Yeah.
Why are we still quoting his lines and sharing his memes all these years later?
That's the million-dollar question. We'll dig into that a bit more when we come back.
Okay, awesome. Sounds good.
Welcome back for the final stretch of our Will Ferrell deep dive. Before the break, you left us with a great question. What is it about his humor that makes it so enduring?
Right. Why do we still quote his lines and share those memes all these years later?
It's like he's found the secret formula for timeless laughter.
Yeah, and I think a big part of it is that he creates characters that are totally out there, but also strangely relatable.
You know what I mean? Like, his
Okay.
characters are larger than life, almost cartoonish.
Uh-huh.
But they have these little quirks and vulnerabilities that make them feel human.
Yeah, it's like he's holding up this funhouse mirror to all of us,
Right.
showing us these exaggerated versions of ourselves and our flaws. But he does it with such warmth and affection that
Yeah.
we just can't help but laugh.
Exactly. He's not making fun of us.
No,
He's laughing with us.
totally.
He's saying, hey, we're all a little weird, a little messy,
Uh-huh.
and that's okay.
Right, and that's what makes his characters so endearing and memorable. And it's not just the characters themselves, it's the situations that he puts them in. Think about it. A jazz flute solo gone wrong, a tense cowbell-fueled recording session,
Oh, yeah.
an overly enthusiastic cheerleader trying to defy gravity.
I love it.
He finds humor in the unexpected in those moments where things go gloriously off the rails.
He takes these everyday scenarios and just cranks them up to 11,
Yeah.
pushing them to the point of absurdity, and that's where the real magic happens.
Right, it's like he's saying life is unpredictable, so let's just embrace the chaos and have a good laugh.
Exactly, and that message is so liberating.
Totally.
It's a reminder to not take ourselves too seriously, to find joy in the unexpected and appreciate all the absurdity that surrounds us. You know, in a world that can feel overwhelming at times, that's a really powerful antidote.
It really is, and I think
Oh.
that's why Ferrell's comedy has resonated with so many people for so long. It's not just about the jokes. It's about connecting with our shared humanity, our quirks, our foibles,
Our need for a good laugh.
and our need for a good laugh. And he does it all with such a genuine sense of playfulness and warmth.
It's true.
So to wrap up our deep dive, we encourage you to keep exploring Ferrell's work.
Yeah.
Whether it's revisiting those classic SNL sketches or discovering his hilarious film roles,
Uh-huh.
let his infectious energy remind you to embrace the absurdity of life and never lose your sense of humor.
And remember, whenever life throws you a curveball channel, your inner Will Ferrell, crank up the cowbell and just laugh.
That's all the time we have for today's deep dive. Thanks for joining us on this hilarious journey, and keep exploring the world with curiosity and a healthy dose of laughter.